Hello everybody, Chris here, and in this video I'm going to be showing all of you how to set up a main menu screen for your game. I already have a test level, so we'll create the main menu, which will have a start game button, which will allow us to load this level whenever that button is pressed. So to go ahead and create our second scene where the main menu will reside, I'll go up to File, New Scene, and then I'm just going to create a basic 2D built-in scene. And I'm going to go ahead and hit Create. So because this is a separate scene, we'll want to save it inside of our project as a scene we can switch between this one and the test level. So I'm going to hit Control S to pop up the Save Scene menu. And then I'm going to navigate to the Scenes folder, which I created to store all my scenes. And I'll save it in here as a Unity scene file. So for the file name, I'll just call it Main Menu and hit Save. And now the scene will exist down here. So in order to draw any UI elements, we're going to want a canvas inside of our scene. So I'm going to right click, go to UI, and you can choose canvas directly, but we can actually skip a step just by choosing panel. So if we choose panel, it'll create a canvas under it. So every UI element has to be created on a canvas. So a canvas will be automatically created if the one doesn't already exist. Let's go to scene view. And we can see this panel. If we turn it off, then you'll notice that the background of the panel kind of goes away. So by default, it is this white colored background, but I actually want to change that to a simple graphic to use as the background. So I just kind of created this in Asset and put it in the project in the arts folder as a PNG. So we can navigate to that source image here by choosing the selector and finding it by name. So I believe I called it something like main menu. So I'm going to click on that, and this image is 320 by 180 pixels. You can see that it's automatically stretching to the extent of our screen, and that's because of these anchor presets over here. So you don't necessarily have to stretch it if you don't want to, but if you know that, for instance, your game is going to be 16 by 9 and you just want to scale whatever pixel art you had up, then you could do that pretty easily. Now, if you are using low resolution art, then once again, you're going to want to make sure in your art folder for the UI stuff that you are having it set to filter mode point and compression none for it to actually display correctly. So now if we click on the panel, we're also going to want to make this not transparent at all. We don't want any background color to show through. So I'm going to click on color, and I'm going to take the A for alpha and set that all the way to 255, which is going to make it fully visible here. So now we can add in all the other stuff like buttons or text on top of this. So I'm going to right click on the panel, go down to UI, and let's create a text with the TextMesh Pro. So when you choose this, if you haven't already imported into your project, you'll get a pop-up that says to import the assets. So you'll need to do that before you can use TextMesh Pro. But this is the new standard in creating text elements inside of Unity. So with this text here, I'm going to increase the font size and make it a lot larger. So let's try typing in 100. And I'm also going to stretch the box so that the text can actually fit. You might also want to position it on your screen. And let's go ahead and make it middle aligned here, center aligned. You can actually make it middle vertically as well if you want. But this default font asset, Liberation Sans, is a really basic looking font. Nothing wrong with that, but we might want something a little bit more stylized. So if you go to a site like dafont.com, you can find different fonts. And if you bring them into the project, this is as a TTF file, then we can convert them really easily into a asset that will work with the TextMesh Plus setup. So to do that, once you have your font in your project, you right click on it, you go down to Create, and then TextMeshPro and Font Asset. And this SDF is what is going to be created from that. So with the SDF, you can change the font asset here inside of the inspector. So I'm just going to drag and drop this upheave TT SDF file into the font asset there. Drag and drop, let go. And we can see this is a pretty cool pixel art font. So let's just scale it up a little bit more. I'll do 200. And then if you need it to be positioned, let's say, centered on the screen perfectly, the box, not the text inside of the box, then you can come up here, hold Alt down to set position, and double click on the center. Then we can give it an offset with position Y. So you can either scroll here on the value in the inspector, or you could just use the gizmos and move it on the screen. So let's get it right about there and change the text. So on the TextMesh Plus field, let's open Text UI and I'll just change the text here. So I will call it Pixel Adventure. Maybe you want that on 2 lines, or maybe you want to have it crammed onto 1. Up to you, and you can change the font size if you need to as well, of course. So just position it where you need to, and then let's add in some menu buttons. So we might want a canvas inside of the canvas to kind of be a parent object for the buttons in case we need to change something that applies to all 3 of the buttons, which would be the start game, the options button, and the exit button all at once. So I'm going to right click on the canvas, go down to UI, choose canvas to create another canvas. This has a rect transform, so it's a little different than a standard game object. And now we can position 3 buttons under this. So I'm going to right click, go down to UI, and then let's see, button, TextMeshPro. And I'll duplicate this 2 times for now, and then position them where I want them to be. You could either go left to right or top down. So you can either lay this out, top down, left to right, whatever works for you. I'm going to go left to right for this video, just for the sake of demonstration. So to make things line up nicely, I'm going to make sure that this button on the left has the same negative value for the position X as the one up here as a positive value. So for right now, I'll just take that -456 and turn it into a +456 here. So now they're evenly spaced out at least. And we can also see that those buttons are going to be way too small. So we'll need to increase the size of the text as well. So if you expand a button, you'll see that there's a text element under it. So I'm going to click on the text and let's do start game. For the second button text, let's go down here and I'm going to change it to options. And then the third button, I'm going to go down here and change it to exit, or we can also rename the buttons so that it makes more sense. So I could call this start game button. I could call the second one options button and the third one quit button. Now, if we ever wanted to use any of these button assets across our game, you can always take individual objects like this, bring them into your project as a prefab, and then you can create copies in other scenes or other menus if you need to. For right now, I'll just skip doing that. So the start game button, I want to increase its size. So let's click on the text and increase the font size here to start. Then I will click on the start game button and change the width and height for the button. So I'll just make this big enough so it can actually fit the text. Let's try 320 for the width and 60 for the height. That's not enough. So 120 for the height and 400 for the width. Okay, looking a little better. I will make it 100 for the height. And that's not bad right there. So I will basically put in the same settings for options, 400, 100. And then quit 400, 100. And let's change the size of the text as well. So I had the text set to 72. So 72, and then down here, 72 as well. So now if I took a look at the game view and I was playing it on a screen this size, this would be how it would look after everything's scaled up. Keep in mind that this is much bigger than the size of a typical phone. So if you need to shrink it down for a mobile game, you'd be looking more at this for your actual sizes. So sometimes you actually do need to make things like the buttons quite large so they can actually be pressed on a smaller screen. So now back on the scene view, I'm going to take the canvas for the buttons. I'm going to rename it button canvas. And I'm also going to take the Y position gizmo and move this down a bit so that basically all 3 of the buttons are repositioned at the same time. Checking game view. And maybe I want the Pixel Adventure text to come down a little bit as well. So we can always lower that down, maybe even increase the size of the font, 190 or 200. So checking game view one more time, it's pretty okay for right now. So now we want to give actual functionality to these buttons. Let's start with the start game button. So the start game button, let's go ahead and, so with the start game button, we want the scene manager in our Unity game to open up a specific scene. So you can do that by number or the name of the scene. I think number works really well because you can always just go to File, Build Settings to check the numbers associated with the scenes in your game. So these won't change unless you actually mess with this list here. If we do add open scenes, then you'll see that the main menu scene, which is currently open, is added into this list. So now main menu is scene 1 and test level is scene 0. So we might want to pull test level below here so that main menu is scene 0. Makes sense since that would be the first screen that would load after all the splash screens and stuff. And then test level can be scene 1 since that would be the first level for the game. Or really you can organize it however you want. You just need to know these numbers down here or the exact string name of the scenes if you want to reference it that way. So then we just need to create a script and have an on-click event trigger for our buttons. So I already created this basically. So I'm going to do start game button as the script. And then to just open it up so you can see it. In here, I have public int game start scene. So this is being stored on the script as a number we can change when we want to change which scene is the first one that's going to start when we hit the start button. And then in this method, start game, which is going to trigger on click, we do scene manager.load scene, and then the integer value or the string name of the scene, whichever way you want to do it. So to get the string manager, you have to be using Unity engine.scene management. So add that to the namespace up there, or it'll give you the option to autocomplete added up here. And then we just need to load the start scene. So to get the number for that, once again, file build settings, we can see test level is 1. So I want to set this value to 1. Now, I was thinking as you grow your project out, you might actually want this value to be something of a global variable that you would set for your game settings, and then you can reference that anywhere across your... So if you think there's going to be the need for anything else in the game to know what the number of your game start scene is, you can write it once and then just keep referencing that value across all of your scripts, but don't really need to worry about it for right now. So I'm just going to store that in the script there. So game start scene 1 is going to open when we press on this start game button. But for that to actually happen, we have to add that method to the onClick event. So onClick for the start game button, clicking plus. Now we choose the script where we're going to get the function from. So now we need to choose the script where we're going to get the function from. The easiest way to do that is just to drag and drop the start game button script into here. Okay, now we can reference any of the functions on that script. So start game button script and then start game. So that's how you link the functionality from the script onto the onClick event. So now if we go ahead and hit play and let's look at game view, we can click on start game here. Okay, so right now the start game button isn't actually clicking for me at all. If I check my console, I can see that right now I'm using the old Unity engine import class in my event system. This is because I switched to the new import system. So I need to click on event system here and replace with import system UI import module. You only need to do that if you're actually using the new Unity import, which is a optional package that you get in Window Package Manager. Okay, so now that should clear up all those error messages. If I hit play, now we can actually click on the start game button. And when we do so, about a second later, the test level scene is going to load. So we can see we have this test level scene loaded up, and don't destroy on load. There may be some objects in your game where when a scene switches, you don't want to destroy that when you switch scenes. So next up for the quit game button, it's going to be pretty similar. So we could keep writing these individual tiny scripts just to have like one function for starting the game or stopping the game. Another alternative would be to have a manager object inside of our scene. So we'll do things a little bit differently this time. I'm going to right click in the main menu and I'll create an empty game object. I will just call this game manager. And then let's add a script to it. So I'm going to just call this game manager new script, create an add. So instead of having a button script attached to quit button, we'll have this game manager, which will have different functions. And then we can just have one manager have all the functionality for the on-click events to actually trigger. Okay, so next for the quit button, we would follow a very similar process. So one option, of course, is to just create a tiny script that only manages the start game button or the quit game button and attach that to those objects. Another option would be to create kind of a menu manager, which will have the actual code functionality written in one place, and then we can reference that on each of the buttons. Might be a little easier than creating a million different tiny scripts. So I'm going to right click in the scene view, create a new empty object, and I'm going to call this menu manager. And then let's add a component. I'll call it menu manager script, and let's create an add. So now we just need to edit this, and the code won't really change. It's just which object we're referencing it on. So I'm going to get rid of all this right here. And then I will do a new public void function quit game. And in order to quit the game, we need to do application.quit. And if we wanted to, we could just take the code from start game button, remove the script, and reference it in the menu manager instead. For right now, let's get the quit button, and let's reference this menu manager object in the onClick event. So I'm going to drag this in here. Then I'm going to go to the function dropdown, menu manager, quit game. And now if we hit play, go to game view, click on the quit button, then it should quit out of our game. But I guess that doesn't actually work when you're just testing. So we actually have to build the game. Let me go ahead and do that. So let's go ahead, file, build settings. Going to do a clean build. Let's put it out here into a new folder. So builds, select folder. So this is outside of the project. If you try to build inside of the project, I was getting some errors a moment ago. Okay, now the game's built, so let's go ahead and open it up. And we can see our screen loads up. So let's try the quit button now. Click it once, boom, game quits. Okay, so that was extremely magical. Let's show something a little bit more tricky, which is to actually build out the options menu and open it up. So to build out our options menu, I'm going to want to add in another panel, which will have a background color, just like this one over here. Going to right click on canvas. Let's go down to UI panel. We can see it kind of hovers over the underlying one. So this one, I'll leave a little bit of transparency, but I'm going to change the alpha value to 200. And to make it a little nicer, I'll just reuse the main menu background. So let's select from the sprites, main menu, just click that. Okay, so there, now we have one hovering on top of our main menu panel. So if I turn it on and off, you can kind of see that the background fades into view or not. So now I don't want this options panel to completely cover everything behind it. So what you can do is you can set the left, top, right, and bottom values. So these are a offset from those directions to pull on the sides. So if I do 200 left, that means the 200 pixels on the left here are going to be cut out from this smaller panel. And I'll just do that for all 4 of those values, like so. And now we have a smaller panel in here for our options. I might want to increase the opacity a little bit more, just so that the background is really not getting in the way there. And now let's add some stuff to this options panel. I might even hit F2 and rename it options panel, kind of making it more clear what's what. So this up here would be the main menu. And then we have the button canvas. And actually the button canvas, I might want that as a child of the main menu. That only makes sense. So I just dragged that up there. Okay, so now all of that can be enabled or disabled with one button click. I think that's a little better. So the options panel now, let's right click on it, go down to UI. Let's try adding something like a slider. So the slider is a bar you can click on and you can drag to set settings. It would be good for things like volume, for instance. So I might set 100 as the max value for the volume. And let's also add a text. So now with this slider, I want to make it bigger. I'm going to try doubling the width and height, maybe even triple the height and triple the width, making it nice and big, position it where it needs to be. And I can add a text element under it, which will keep its position relative to the slider. So if I right click here, I can do text. Let's pull this over here. And then for this text, I'll just say volume. So if we go into game mode, hit play, we'll be able to move this slider left and right, but we don't have like a number indication of what's going on there. So it would be nice if we had another text field here which showed what the actual volume number was. So to do that, let's go to scene view. I'll rename this text here and I'll call it label. Let's add another text, right click on the slider, UI, pull this over here, and I'll give it a default dummy number of 100. Okay. Positioning it roughly where I want it. And I'll rename this text number. I'll click on the slider and on value changed here. I'm going to do a plus. I'm going to drag in this number object. So now to have the slider update this text is going to be pretty simple. Let's add a component to the slider and I will just call it text slider. New script. Let's create an add. And in here, first, I'm going to need to get a reference to the text over here. So to reference the text object in our script, we're going to need to do TextMeshPro UI, and this is using the TMPro namespace. So I'm going to make this public so that we can set it in the inspector, and then I'll just call this number text. So with the number text in the script, we can create the function for this. So public void set number text, and we'll need to pass in the value. So float value, which of course we're getting from the slider. And then we'll do number text dot text, which takes a string. So the value is a float, so I'm going to do value dot toString so that it's formatted correctly. So if you want to add extra stuff here to the string, then you can just combine strings with the plus sign if you want to do that. So now we need to reference the number in this field. So I'm going to drag and drop that over here. And then on value changed for the slider, we need to take this script up here, grab the function. So dynamic float set number text. So we do that, and that means that whenever this changes, this is going to run automatically. So let's hit play and game mode. And now we can drag this and we can see that the volume is being reflected as a number over there. But I probably want whole numbers to be checked here so that the value can only be between 0 and 100, but nothing in between there. So we're incrementing one at a time now. Okay, we probably also want a way to close the options panel. So I'll just create another button, right click on the slider, right click on the options panel, UI button, and then button. I'm going to anchor this to the top left. So click on the anchoring and I'll hold Shift and Alt down, pop that over there. Then let's just offset it by a little bit. So 50 and then -50 for Y. And for the button, I guess I'll just rename the text to say close. So that should be functional enough. Then for the button functionality on click, let's take the, the options panel. Gonna do that right here. And I am going to go into game object and turn it off with set active Boolean off. So now if we hit play, we can see the close button actually just disables it automatically. You see everything in the hierarchy over here just turns off with that set active off. So actually closing the menu is pretty easy. And likewise, if we start with this disabled, so I'll just select the options panel and disable that. Now we can look at the main menu, the button canvas, the options button, and we can take the options panel and this on click and then set it active to true. So add a on click event, drag the options panel in, function game object, set active, and then true. Okay, so now if we hit play, clicking on options opens up this panel and we can click close to close it. So really simple. Start game works, quit works. So now our start game is functioning. Just takes a second to open the scene. Options opens the menu, and then quit quits the game, but that only works in a built version of the game. So one small thing we might want to change when we open up the options menu, we probably want to take this number value and have it automatically set to the default value in the slider over here. So for the options panel, the slider, we can also make it so that when this text slider script starts, that we also set the number text. So I'm going to open up the script one more time, and this will be really simple because it's just a mono behavior. So if we do void start, then we do set number text, but then we need to know the float value. And so if we get the slider component referenced inside of the text slider script, then we can get the value from it. So the easiest way to do that, I guess, would just be to do private slider, and then on start, slider equals get component slider. Okay, now let's import the Unity Engine UI so that it knows what it's talking about. And now that we have this slider, we can do set number text slider dot value. Okay, and this will also mean that this text slider component requires there being a slider for whatever it's attached to, but that should be fine because these are always going to go together, or one would think. So let's go ahead and hit play. Open up the options menu, and we can see it defaults to 0. So now whenever we change it, the value is going to be updated, but when the options menu starts, it's set to the correct value. So to show that, let's set the value to 100. Also check whole numbers out of the game, so now there's no floating decimal point. Hit play, options, we can see it's set to 100. If we set it to something else like 80, hit play, options, and it's set to 80. So that'll do well enough for our purposes here. And with these options values, you're probably going to later have some kind of game manager script which will keep reference to all of these so that your volume's playing at the right level throughout the game. And maybe that's a setting that you save to your game save files as well, so that when the player opens up the game, they would be playing with the same volume as before as well. But that is definitely beyond the scope of this tutorial. So as far as building a simple main menu screen with a start game, an options button, and a quit button goes, that is pretty much going to be it for this video. So if you stuck around to the end, thank you for watching all the way. I've been Chris, and I will see all of you in my future Unity content.